Alright guys, we're going to get started here. Yeah, to start off, I guess we'll do a couple of introductions. If you want to start off, all the Gen Ed guys. I don't know, can you guys hear me? Do we need a mic or not? Yeah. Okay, need a mic? Set the mic. Oh my God.
Is that better, Thorsten?
Kevin's
Good.
karaoke nights from yeah.
All right, well, thank you guys all for coming. For myself at Horsch here, it's pretty exciting to come back after the first year and see this many sprayers lined up outside and this many people starting to come. So appreciate y'all for showing up. And we'll do a few introductions here to start. So if anybody doesn't know me, I'm Mike from Horsch, and I get the opportunity to play with these sprayers every day. Okay, so we got kind of a mix, auto select and PWM, so we're gonna cover both of those setups today. I'm not gonna lie to you guys today, we had some issues with the sprayers last year. The presentation I have today is not necessarily a sales presentation. We're gonna go over those problems and how to fix them in the field. So we're gonna try to, limit the amount of phone calls and limit the amount of service calls. So the most common issues that we had in the field, I have a short presentation on that first before we go over the monitor and the settings. So we'll do that part first. So I got a series of pictures on my cell phone. The most common problems, I've screenshot them, and then usually when guys call in, I'll just send the picture out right away. So the most common pictures I have on there are just an easy presentation to build. So a lot of the information on the sprayer is online already. So if you go onto my YouTube channel, you'll see exactly how to clean the sprayer out, exactly how to do a boom rinse, an air blowout. I just put one up recently about setting up your auto select profiles. So that would be a good one to check out. But yeah, check out the channel, and a lot of information is on there. I probably send this one out once a week. It's a page in your manual, but this is all the oils, the fuel, the fluids you're supposed to put in it, right? So, if you call asking me what type of oil to put in the sprayer, in the hubs or something like that, I'll be surprised, because we have all this listed in the manual, but it's up there on the screen and also in your booklets. So, service intervals is the next one. I get a lot of calls on the service intervals, so it's broken down here now by part number, and also there's by kits at the bottom. So the very first service interval is going to be 600 hours, and you have a part number at the bottom there where you can order all the filters that you're going to need for that 600-hour service. Usually, if you don't put 600 hours a year on, I tell the guys, do the engine oil every winter, do the hubs every winter, even if you don't put 600 hours on. I don't want to stop during the season to do a service once I hit 600 hours. And I guess if there's any questions today, just stop me anytime. Just yell.
What if you don't put 600 on in 2 years?
If you don't put 600 on in 2 years, it's up to you. You can't change the engine oil or the planetaries too much, right? But if you're only putting 300 hours a year on, you can go 2 years. The interval is 600 hours. But most guys in Canada have been doing it every off season for the hubs and the engine oil. So I see this one all the time. I'll show up to a guy's field and he'll still not have a charcoal filter in the cab. So this is important. Every spring, put a new charcoal filter in. The part number's in the book there for you. It's to protect you, right? So keep that charcoal filter in the plastic until you go to install it. When you get a brand new sprayer, there'll be 2 screws that hold that red piece into the cab, right? So you remove those 2 screws and then insert that charcoal filter on top. So if I'm riding around in your sprayer this year, I'm hoping you guys have the charcoal filters installed.
We'll take it out first.
Put it back in.
What's that?
We'll take everything out before you come.
Oh, thanks. Just for me, right? Perfect. But you'd be surprised, serious. A lot of guys, you know, the charcoal filter is still sitting in the fridge underneath the buddy seat when I show up to go spray. So it's important to install.
How does the filter last? Is it an hour restriction on the filter, or how long does it last?
The service interval on the filter is really up to you, your personal preference. It's to protect you. I have some guys who change them every 2 weeks. And some guys, you know, it's every off season. But, you know,
What do you guys recommend for Horsch?
every off season.
Every off-season?
So every spring before you go to get in the field, install it that first day. So don't do it in the winter and let it sit. All right, so when you get your new sprayer delivered, the very first service you're gonna do to it is just the hubs. So you're gonna drain the oil out of those hubs after 100 hours of use on the machine. So if you have a 600-hour sprayer, 1-year-old used that just got delivered, you know, make sure, talk to Gen Ag, make sure the hubs have been done first before you go use it. So every interval after that, like I said, every winter is when we wanna start doing the oil change on those. So I hate that I have to show this, but I learned something new this year too. The drain plugs on these, the picture in the manual is slightly wrong. So when you are gonna change the oil, open the blue arrow first, which would be just your breather at the top and your fill, and then the red arrow, and then the green arrow. And then when you're putting the plugs back in, it's in the same direction. Put the green arrow in first, then the red arrow, and then put the oil in through the blue. So the red arrow is your fill level. Make sense? So I see this one at the dealerships quite a bit. When I show up at a dealer, they'll be boosting the sprayer if the batteries are dead, but they'll be hooked directly to the battery. So instead of hooking directly to the battery, you can go right off the ground, right on the engine, and then we've installed that red long bar there to hook up your positive. Just like we have hooked up on the chargers here. You don't have to go all the way up to the battery. I don't see many guys asking or talking about this, but the spray product pump has a coolant barrier, so you can't run it dry. So every off season you have to check and make sure there's still, they call it hypo barrier fluid, and they got a part number there for it, but it's just to protect the pump from running dry. So you gotta make sure that it's right full every off season.
Does it go down?
I've never seen it go down, but you're supposed to check it. The only way to check it is pour more fluid in the top till it runs over.
Put a little wire, I guess.
Yeah, that too. There is no sight tube on it, so. Okay, we're gonna talk about some parts that I wanna see, you know, with you in the cab if you hit a tree. Somebody ran over some part numbers on both the Auto Select and the Raven Hawkeye 2. So you'll be able to go to the parts counter now with your booklet, and you'll have all the part numbers listed of things we should have in stock on the sprayer. Might save you, you know, a trip into town when you hit a tree or a bush or something. So we'll cover Auto Select first. The way Auto Select works, the compressed air comes in on that Auto Select valve body, pushes against that spring, and opens up to allow the chemical into the nozzle body. That whole piece can break if you hit something, but these are all the nozzle bodies that come with it. On the next slides, I'll give you the part numbers for them. So this is how it all kind of fits together. The part that usually breaks though is number 9. So if you drag it on the ground, number 9 is gonna break. That little nipple at the top snaps off, and then you'll have a leak. So instead of having a bunch of number 1 and all these other part numbers in there, if you have number 9 in stock, you know, that's usually the one to get you by and get you going in the field again. So here's you know, a bunch of part numbers that you should have if you have Auto Select. So what this is the 2 position up here, which also happens to be the fence row nozzle for PWM. Then you have the 4 position down here. This guy here is the valve body. So basically just the spring and the Teflon or the little diaphragm that lets the chemical in and out. And this last one is the pressure relief valve. So whenever the air pressure stops, the pressure has to relieve to let that little spring close. So sometimes these break and don't release the pressure. So these controllers here control the air going to the nozzle bodies. There's 2 different styles. We had an old style and a new style. It's easy to tell the difference if you have this document, because you can see the old style has those long connectors that come out of them. The 2 parts are not interchangeable. So if you have the old style, it's not going to work if you put a new style controller onto it. You'll get an error. So what we need to do, if you break one of these, you have to make sure the parts guys are getting you the right kind. So when you go to the parts counter, a picture is probably the best way. Make sure he's ordering the right style of controller. So these are our fence row nozzle bodies. I've taken a lot of used sprayers on trade over the year that's have no fence rows left. It's a part that usually gets smashed up. Our sprayer is protected pretty well, but there is a possibility you'll break these. So keep a couple in a toolbox, and it might save you a trip to town. But on the left there is our Raven Hawkeye nozzle body for the fence row, and then you have a right and a left side for auto select. All right, we'll switch over to the Hawkeye parts. So these parts here are, a common part failure for for Raven Hawkeye. So what I want you to keep in the toolbox, a couple of these solenoids, right? So the top left, which is your nozzle control valve. Pretty expensive part, right? Like you're looking at, I'm not sure what Gen Ag is charging for these here, but you can buy this part from any CNH dealer as well, right? So it's just a Raven part. If you have a nozzle that's leaking or dripping, it's usually those second 2 part numbers. So these guys right in here, this little poppet is going to be plugged up, right? There'll be something dripping out of that nozzle. If you do happen to break the nozzle body, the nipple is inside this piece right here, so it's not a 2-piece like the auto select is. You got to buy the whole part. So on the new sprayers now, what's coming with them, we send them all out with a toolbox. Inside that toolbox, there's a bunch of parts that I've just listed there, but having some spares is a good idea. On the Hawkeye systems, it comes with this little wrench. The wrench, these 3 or 4 prongs fit directly into number 3, and then you can take the whole system apart. Once it's apart, you'll find probably a piece of plastic off one of your jugs will be stuck inside there. For all the PWM guys, have you all taken apart a nozzle body? You all know how to do it? Good. So this one might help you in the field sometimes. It gives you some diagnosis on what the lights mean on those solenoids. A lot of the times though, if there's no lights at all, that's usually what happens. So either the wiring harness is cut or a little pin is pulled out. Solenoids are probably the last thing that actually breaks themselves. I find way more problems with the connectors or the wiring harnesses. So this is a good tip here. If you are going to work on the solenoid, leave the connector hooked into the solenoid and then open the nozzle body up and look at the poppet inside. So what this does is it prevents you from getting any moisture or chemical running onto the wiring harness or into the solenoid itself. If you do get water inside there, you can't just hook the connector back up and hope it works, because you're going to get corrosion in there or you're going to destroy that solenoid, and then you're out the $500-600 to replace it. So when you're working on them, make sure, leave the connector hooked up, and then take the solenoid apart. So all the sprayers we have in Manitoba right now are running on 10-inch nozzle spacing. So what that means is we have to run half the tip size of a 20-inch nozzle spacing machine. If we're running half the tip size, we have a bigger chance of plugging tips. So the water source has to be clean. If we're plugging tips, the very first thing we got to look at is the water coming in. Are we sucking directly from a dugout? How many filters we have? I've run into a lot of problems with solenoids wearing out prematurely because of bad water sources. So we have 280 mesh filters after the pump, and then 145 mesh filter on the suction side before the pump. Those 280 mesh filters do a good job, but if you have other contaminants in the water, we want to make sure it's out before it gets onto the sprayer. So if you have a holding tank in the yard, filter the water going into that holding tank. We want to make sure that dirty, foreign objects don't get onto your spray trailer, and we keep all the muck in that filter because it takes longer to fill that, and I don't want to slow down my fill process. So filter it first before it even gets onto the trailer. So that's just some debris we see inside tanks. Sometimes it makes a mess. So what this is a Raven poppet that's been damaged by, I guess, stuff in your water. So if it has this little ring right in the middle like this, it's gonna leak, right? Or possibly won't put out the right rate if it's not pulsating the same speed as all the other ones. So when you check these poppets, if it has some damage in here like this, replace that poppet inside the solenoid. The solenoid is still fine. It's just the poppet inside there needs to be replaced. But we can fix this by having good filters. So the sprayers all come with these little black jumper plugs in the toolbox. So what this does, if you have a solenoid go bad, or doesn't show any lights flashing or shows the wrong color of lights flashing on it, if you just need to get by and get that tank sprayed out, you can unplug that solenoid and plug in this jumper, and the system will work normally. It's just you won't have any chemical coming out of that one nozzle. So lift your boom up higher, get more overlap, and hopefully it doesn't leave that bad of a strip. But it'll get you by until you can go to town and get a new solenoid.
Are they coated, or can you take an end solenoid and put it in a middle spot?
You can't. So if you take one off the end and put it into the middle, you would have to recalibrate the system.
Okay.
So each one of those solenoids has its own CAN address and serial number, and they're all in series. So the system knows what solenoid is in what position.
Does it do it automatically on startup, or is that a process?
It looks for the order on startup every time you turn the machine on, but if you were to change a solenoid out, you have to hit the check for updates button and then the calibrate button. When you hit that calibrate button, it puts them all into order.
Okay.
Good question. So if you do break something, and if there is error codes popping up on the machine, you can download the Horsch error code app, or just go onto Google and type in Horsch error codes. So on that browser, you'll be able to type in the code just like this, and it'll give you some more information, and hopefully it doesn't just say contact the service department, because sometimes it does. So, does anybody use this app? Do you guys already have it? No, never? Okay, just call me instead. It's both. So you can just type it into Google or download the Horsch error codes app. It also works for the planters and the seeders.
Is the app offline content if you're in the middle of nowhere, or is it web-based?
Web-based.
What's that?
I didn't hear that.
I said it's no good in that.
Yeah. We have been talking about putting the Starlink bracket on the sprayer, so working on that. So all the new machines have the ability to use this, which is the Horsch Connect. So we have a little Wi-Fi receiver on the roof and a SIM card installed. So what this does, it allows you to walk behind the sprayer and check your nozzles. So just like on the planter or the Avatar, when you can walk behind and calibrate, on this setup you can walk behind, turn on one section or one nozzle at a time. It'll also allow you to start your pump and turn on your master switch. So that is the mobile control app you need to download if you have one of the newer machines. If you also have one of the newer machines, you can download the telematics app. So what this will tell you is where the machine is, what it's doing, the application rates, the boom height, and also it'll tell you the tank levels, right? So your guy in the water truck is gonna know how much water you have left on without having to call. So just that one feature alone, the water levels is nice to have. Go ahead. It's free for 2 years. After that, the next 2-year subscription is 300 euros. The reason why it's still, the only reason I know that is we haven't ever sold that subscription yet. It only came out last year, so none of them have expired. But 300 euros for 2 years in the future.
For 2 years, we're 2 years.
Yeah, but that's only for the telematics. The Wi-Fi signal to walk behind and check your nozzles is always free. There you go. Yeah, so if you want to go onto your cell phone and use it like John Deere Ops Center, that's the part that's a subscription, to see your maps and to see the tank levels online. But to check your nozzles, that part will always be free.
And that can be added to our machine, right?
We're working on that.
Yeah, okay.
I think, Derek, were you working on that one?
I know I've found the harness. The harness is a huge change because it's from the front of the cab all the way back to the machine, so it's costing.
Yeah, so you can check your nozzles through that Raven Slingshot app like we tried in the yard there, but to see your data, you have to have the Horsch Connect installed. So this is standard on every new sprayer now. It's not an option, so every new sprayer has it.
But I think you kind of need, like the problem is when you pull your phone up, you have your gloves on, or you pull a nozzle apart, you have to take your glove off, or your phone. If you don't have an option to either get a remote, then you can just use the remote, or your phone if you want to. But then the remote you just leave back there, right?
Yeah, the remote is a better idea, because I agree. I don't want to get chemical on my cell phone. This is better than having to walk back and forth into the cab like we've been doing in the past, for sure.
Yeah, we used it last year, it was nice one.
But yeah, the remote we've been talking about, there's some aftermarket companies like Spray Test, where it's pretty much any sprayer you could install it on, right? But there is no remote for the Raven Hawkeye or for the Auto Select as of today. All right, so when you go to change tires, I get this call a lot, air pressures to put in the tires. So what I want, everybody here has 380 105R54s for their skinny tires, a few different brands, but right around that 30 PSI mark is gonna give you pretty good performance out of those tires. This is just a guideline, if you wanna go a few PSI higher or lower, it's all right. The 950R46s are the majority of what we have for the fat tires. 24 PSI I find works pretty good there. There is some other brands and setups and sizes of tires that we have, but I've heard down as low as 7 PSI some guys are running at, right? So it all depends on the type of tire that you're running. So this isn't as negotiable. When we have our torques, it doesn't matter what kind of tire you have on, we have to torque to these specs. So when you have the skinny tires on, you're going to torque it to 376 foot-pounds. These two sprayers here both have the pressure plates installed. These pressure plates were You know, it was a funny story. So the engineers came to Canada, they saw a bunch of John Deere sprayers with these pressure plates, and they decided to put them on our sprayer as well, just for some extra strength. It's only meant for tires bigger than 750 millimeters in width. So if you're running 900s, you have to have these pressure plates installed, and it's a different set of nuts.
Don't fit. I have like the plates don't fit anymore. This stuff's up too short.
Too short?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a custom-made rim with a thicker plate. If you can't fit it on and they don't fit, then don't. But what's that? Yeah, you can buy longer studs. So we've set up, I believe, one sprayer or two sprayers now with those longer studs.
But if your studs are long enough, your rim is probably thick enough.
Yeah, really. There's only a few farms in Manitoba with those 900s. So anything bigger than 750, that's where I want to see them installed. You don't have to put them on the skinny tires like we see in the shop here. So you can use the original nuts, you can use no pressure plates, but you cannot use the nuts that came with the skinny tires with the pressure plates, right? Because it's that conical style, or tapered, I guess. Anybody try using this thing, the lifting device? So, didn't work for pretty much anybody. Okay, you guys use yours?
Good, made some changes.
Okay.
That's where.
So we've broke a few of them, and it is a safety risk. If you, like, what happened on your farm with yours?
Even use it, it's just super sketchy. It's wiggly,
Yeah, it is. So I'm trying to get this as an option from factory instead of standard, but it is standard equipment right now. We've actually broke some of them because the instructions in the manual are not clear. So there's 4 things you have to do. Number 1, your main tank and the rinse tank have to be empty. It's common sense, right? That you can't have extra weight on the machine when we're lifting up on it. You have to remove the big plastic or the steel wheel motor cover, depending on the age of your machine. The new sprayers all come with a plastic cover on the wheel motors, and you have to remove the bracket that holds that wheel motor cover in place. There's 2 bolts on the bottom of those end plates of the cylinders. You have to remove those 4 bolts, so 2 per cover. I see Kevin shaking his head at me. I know
Such a pain in the ass.
we talked about it, right?
We struggled when we made a jack this winter for sending help with this.
Yeah. So the 4 bolts have to be removed, and then the last one, which is the most important one, all the air has to be out of the system. So please do not try to use this lifting device with air in the airbags, because you'll probably cause an accident.
But I do recommending them to hold tripod or something else that won't go under the frame or what.
The safest way to change the tires would be to lift up with like one of those fancy double cylinder tire lift, or they call it tire grabbers or whatever. You can buy them at the farm shows, but I've seen some colonies build them as well. You can buy them, but yeah, that's the safest way for sure. We're the only manufacturer, I believe, that sends out a bracket like this, and I really wish we didn't, because it has broke a few times.
And then what happens?
Hopefully you're not underneath it. Yeah.
It must wreck
It just bends the little hooks, is what I've seen.
the wheel motor doesn't go crashing to the ground.
Depends if your tire's on or not, right? I haven't seen it yet. So that's why I'm covering this. So if you do happen to use this device, these are the 4 steps you have to follow to make sure it works.
Like the ones that broke while jacking up, right?
Exactly. All right, we'll cover the most common problems we ran into on the service side. Show of hands, anybody have depth problems last year? One farm, that's not bad. Okay. So if you haven't had this problem yet, you might. So this is the most common DEF problem on the machine. So it's a differential pressure sensor line that plugs. We haven't seen any DEF issues except this one, correct?
A couple modules fail.
Okay, so this is the most common one that we see. So I'm going to teach you how to fix this without having to call the service department or do a service call. You can do this in the field.
Everybody around me has had the problem too.
Okay, so everybody else didn't want to say it, but they did have DEF issues.
Yeah, just put a delete on it and all the.
Yeah. Don't tell me.
Too much power.
Okay, so I'll show you how to fix this. At the bottom of the canister here, there's this little elbow. What's happening is this is plugging up. So it's, crystallized DEF inside there is usually, so it's gonna plug right there. So you know where it is on the sprayer now. Usually what was happening, we text this picture out to check this line, right? So what you need to do and what you need to keep with you in the cab is a 17 millimeter wrench is the size that you need. So make sure you all take 17 millimeter wrench with you in the cab this season. Turn the engine off as soon as this warning pops up. If you let it go long enough, it will derate your engine power. So I don't know who it was, but I heard a story of somebody spraying out a tank backwards because the machine has more power going backwards and forwards. I heard it was somebody in Manitoba.
Does the cab swim the same as the stereo?
No. So nobody's admitting, so I don't know if this was
That's what the camera's in for, right?
could be, yeah. So somebody told me from Manitoba in service training this happened, so anyways. So this is how you fix it so you don't have to spray the rest of your tank backwards. 17 millimeter wrench, you're gonna take off that little elbow, and this little tip or the elbow is probably plugged up. So what you're gonna do is take it off. You can walk to your back rack. There's an air gun on the back rack and you can blow it out. If you keep a little pick or something along those lines inside, you can see the pictures there where it was crystallized and clogged in that elbow. Once you fix the problem, right, which was that plugged line, your machine may or may not still be derated, right? So if you drive it long enough with this warning code, it's gonna steal all your power and you won't be able to go, 3 mile an hour or something like that? You can't go any faster than that. So once you fix the problem and get that unplugged, your engine power may still be deleted or derated, I guess. So to trick the system, this is how you do it. So what you're gonna do, and this works anytime, so even if you don't fix the problem, you can still do this procedure, and I'm pretty sure this is gonna work on any CNH engine, right? So if you have any other CNH products, right, with DEF on the DEF codes, so you're gonna do the key off, key on, and wait for these time intervals, and it's gonna give you another half hour of full power. So you can do that 3 times a day for a half hour each time without fixing the problem. But each time you do that, it's looking to see if the problem is gone. So if we blow out that little elbow and the problem is gone, that means we don't have to hook a service tool up to the machine, we don't have to call the dealership, and you're back spraying again. So might save you this season if you happen to have some DEF codes come back and look at this procedure.
But as far as I know, if you do this specific cycle 3 times, you will need a service call for somebody to come out and unlock you with the computer after. That will not be an option.
Yeah, so you can do it twice.
So you can't fix
It
it.
can get you out of the bind, but you will need to.
Yeah. So if the warning code comes, before you do anything, go out and fix it, right? I just showed you exactly how to fix this problem. You have the pictures, you know what wrench and tools you need. But if you keep spraying and it derates the power, you can do this procedure on the screen twice before you're gonna absolutely have to hook a laptop up to it. So it gives you basically an hour of driving time to go home at full speed, right?
How often do you guys see that?
Do you remember what the code is that says on the screen? It says something, just engine something. Too
Engine
high.
fault.
It just says engine something too high.
Yeah,
It's a
so
generic code.
it was just a generic code. So the very first thing to check, any def code you get will be this specific problem because it's the only one we ran across last year. And
It'll say def code, it'll be a def.
it said engine fault last year. We've changed the fault code for just this specific problem where it's gonna say differential pressure sensor fault for this season with the new software that's going in here in the next 2 weeks. So it brings up a good point. Software update is going into everybody's sprayer. It's mandatory for this season. So there's some good features and some good changes on that. The fence row nozzles can now go onto your right-hand console or onto the joystick, which is kind of a nice option. The boom unfolding now, you don't have to be in the boom unfold screen. So we can program the boom unfold onto the right-hand console. So I can be unfolding the boom while I'm, typing in a field name or changing my rate or something like that. So we are paying the dealerships to make sure this software update gets done. So they don't have access to it yet, but make sure it does get done. I haven't tried it myself, but I think the cruise control is supposed to be a better improvement as well. So we'll see. Any questions on this in the def code? Good. So this was a big problem the last 2 years. The steering front wheel deviation. So probably everybody's had this warning pop up, correct? So we've changed the steering cylinders on every machine in Canada. If your steering cylinders still look like this, make sure Gen Ag comes and does the update. So Horsch is buying all new steering cylinders for every machine. We're replacing them all. But it changes to a North American style front steering system on the sprayer and also the rear steering system. So to phase these steering cylinders, all you have to do is before you leave the yard in the morning, you have to steer all the way to the left to the stops, hold it for a second, and then steer all the way to the right to the stops and hold it for a second. Your machines are all four-wheel steering, so when you do this, you have to make sure your four-wheel steering is also turned on, otherwise that back set of steering axles doesn't synchronize. So there's no software, you don't have to touch anything in the monitor to do it, it's always active, but you have to remember to steer all the way to the stops. All clear on that? That was a big one, so yes. If you forget, you might get the warning. But the biggest thing that we've noticed is the auto steer starts to not behave properly. If one of your tires is out of alignment, that auto steer is fighting itself all the time and starts to wobble. So you ran the updated system last year, and
We didn't even do that, okay? And, I mean, from what it was before till what we had the last part, yeah, it's nice to be every day, but yeah, it's not, I didn't think it was 100% necessary, how ours were compared to before. So.
good. So the warning went away though, and wasn't always popping up every day though. Good. So I get this one quite a bit, the colors for the paint on the machine. So you have all the colors in the center, you have the part numbers from Horsch on the right side there, and then on the left side we also have all of the RAL codes to mix the paint up. Yeah, so this one, lots and lots of calls. How do I hook up the Bluetooth? So the password is 1234. But I'm serious, I get lots of calls on this. But it's in your book now. I'll show you how to do it. So if my pump shows pressure and my nozzles are open, my master switch is on, if I don't have any chemical coming out, what's my problem? Does anybody know? valve. So when you do a clean out and you're working on your filters and you check your filters, these two valves right here will give you pressure on your pump, but no chemical will come out. So this valve right here, right after your pump, if you close that, right? Or if you close this one here on the back rack, you're not gonna get any chemical coming out. It's a super easy fix. It's just if you leave that valve in the wrong position. So before you call me with this problem, make sure these two valves always should be open when you're going to spray. Okay, the nozzles turn on as soon as you turn the engine on. Anybody have this problem? Nope. Anybody have a switch box? You got a switch box? Okay. So if you have the switch box installed, you have to make sure this toggle switch here is always turned off, no matter what. So what that means is, as soon as you turn the sprayer on, this switch took over as your master switch and it tried to let chemical out right away. So for anybody who doesn't have this installed, the guys who bought it, it was to give yourself the ability to run 11 manual sections and then 2 fence row nozzles on the 2 outside switches. So it was a nice option, but caused a few problems. You had to make sure this switch right here is always in the off position. So you could even remove that switch, cut it off with a pair of side cutters or something. You'll never need it. So. This one is pretty often. How do I do a clean out? So every new owner, has to figure out how to do this. The clean outs are all online. So if you go back onto the YouTube channel, it's going to show you how to clean out the sprayer online. But there's a few manual steps you have to do. The manual steps are going to be these filters. So there's 4 filters on the sprayer that actually touch chemical. They are located right behind the monitor, the side fill. This is a 45 mesh suction filter. So this is only to protect if you get some rocks inside your fill line going down the road. It's to protect the pump. So some guys clean this out when they change products, some don't. It's a really coarse filter, and I doubt you'll have much chemical ever hanging up on this filter. These 2 right here, so this 80 mesh filter after the pump, and this 80 mesh filter on the back rack after the pump are the 2 you're probably gonna have to clean out. So what I usually do is I buy an extra set of 80 mesh filters. So when I change products or change chemistries, I'm going from wheat to canola, I just throw a new set of filters in, and my canola filters stay on the truck. And I leave them in a pail of water and bleach. The last filter is this dome filter at the top of the tank. That's the 2 lines right here that recirculate back into the tank. So your 2 recirculating filters dump into this dome filter. So when you're doing cleanouts, are you guys mostly pulling the filters out and cleaning them manually, or just going? Good. So that's good to hear, because the system is designed with the recirculating filters that you shouldn't have to clean them out, but depending on the products, sometimes it's a good idea. The majority of calls that I get on filters is a plugged filter. So if you have a bad chemical mixture or something goofy happening inside your tank, the symptom is your rate is not going to hold. Your rate will be jumping high, jumping low, and all over the place. The first thing to check is always going to be plugged filters.
Well, some chemicals like Proline say right on the box 50 mesh minimum. So if you're spraying Proline, you're going to have to pay attention to these filters.
That's a good point. The shear factor of the filter, it's going to say on the box, right, what mesh you're supposed to run. Have you had any issues with Proline then, or do you change the filter size?
We just clean them out once a day.
Okay.
Usually it lasts a day, but I mean, they're, something they changed in recent years, the different active that plugs 80 mesh screens.
Yeah, so if it's plugging them all the time, buy a 50 mesh screen and put those in instead. I never recommend to go off label on chemical, right? But
well, usually putting more water on so you have bigger nozzles anyway, so it can handle a little bit of debris.
Correct. Like the 80 mesh screens, it's really designed for 01 nozzles on auto select. For the guys running PWM, like the 80 mesh screen is almost overkill, right? The auto select 01 nozzles for the super low rates is what these 80 mesh screens are really for. So here's I guess a picture of where those 4 filters are located, or 3, I guess. I see this one all the time, so a loose breakaway. Every sprayer that comes from factory, this nut on top here is way too loose. So what you need to do is tighten this nut down. We did have a product improvement come out, and the sprayers that didn't have the new style breakaway, we replaced this spring with a different style. But with that, we also put a jam nut on top here. So if your sprayer doesn't have it, install the jam nut or some Loctite on there to make sure that it doesn't loosen off on its own. If you make a sharp turn, the breakaway should not engage. If your breakaway is moving and you haven't hit anything, then install that jam nut and tighten it down. So the way I set them, if it takes 2 hands, like if I can move the breakaway with 1 hand, it's too loose. It should be a 2-hand job to get that breakaway to engage. The tank level reads 0. So if you're filling your tank and your tank level, shows 0 and nothing's happening, the float is probably stuck right at the bottom. So if you wait for a few days, you go to the lake or something, you come home and it's reading 0, probably some fungicide dried up inside on that float and stuck it down there. So what you're gonna do is a long stick, and hopefully your tank isn't too full at this point and you've caught it before you filled it right up, but a long stick down to the bottom of this sensor. So your sensor reads right up to the top, position C here, goes right down to the tank sump here at the bottom, and then you're gonna reach in with a stick and just knock it free. That happened to anybody last year? It did happen to you guys? That's the other easier way to probably fix it, right? So make sure it's not chemical, right? But have maybe 200 gallons of water in a tank, put max agitation, and hopefully it works that sensor free. So that's the end of my list of the most common problems. Is there anything you guys would like to add that's popped up quite a bit in the last 2 years? What was the most common things that I didn't mention here? Yeah. I think we covered some of the most pressing ones for sure. But okay, you guys grease these 2 every day? Good. So these are the only 2 grease nipples on the machine. So there's 8 of them, right? 2 per corner that have to be done on a 10-hour interval. Everything else is 50 hours. So these are the only 2 you gotta be aware of, right? So I tell guys daily for these ones, weekly for everything else. If you have the lift for tall corn, then you also have, these guys up here. But for Manitoba, I don't think anybody will have that. But now we're on to a 50-hour interval for the rest of them. So the suspension